Hello and a warm welcome to our latest edition of the Transnet podcast series, where we are broadcasting to you live from the sidelines of the mining Indaba. If you do take a look around me, and even if you listen to the audio, there is a wonderful crowd of individuals who have gathered here, all key participants, not only for the mining Indaba, but also to fundamentally hear the conversations we're going to have here around this red table. This is where we're going to fully unpack, distill, and share a lot more detail and insight into the critical response that Transnet, as a key enabler and provider of logistical services across South Africa, is doing to enhance its delivery for key stakeholders, largely within the minerals and mining sector. Today, we'll be understanding and getting more clarity on some of the strategic shifts and changes that have taken place at Transnet as a group and how that fundamentally translates into enhanced operational activity. Ultimately, better serving its customers and stakeholders and translating into better growth for South Africa's economy. I'm joined today by a man who's been tasked with this job, and more so has actually been implementing a lot of solid solutions to make sure that we get by. Solly Letsoalo joins us as the Chief Operations Officer at Transnet today. Such a pleasure to have you with us, sir.
Good day to you.
Doesn't it feel exciting? We're having a conversation, but there's so many people eavesdropping just by having headphones on.
Yes, and those that are walking past wondering what are these two doing.
Exactly. But it's a conversation, and it's really one that is built with the buzz that we have in terms of the hive of activity here at the mining Indaba. Maybe let's just start with the relevance of the event that we're attending today. Mining Indaba, critical and very important gathering of individuals and, of course, key stakeholders and institutions like Transnet. Help us understand why it remains critical for Transnet to be involved here.
Yeah, we actually play a big role in enabling mining companies to, after taking the minerals out of the ground, to get them to their customers. When we don't perform, they don't export anything. And therefore, we are a critical element, as well as all the other participants that I'm seeing around here at either supplying into the mines or into logistics companies that are serving the mines. So we do play a role in transporting minerals from the mine to the ports, and definitely at the ports, loading these minerals onto vessels that take them to export markets.
100%.
So that is our role.
100%. And that's a very critical role because essentially it enables a lot of trade to take place and, of course, the vibrancy in the economy. It's well documented, though, that Transnet has had to implement a recovery plan, and one that has taken place seeing policy shifts and having that translate into what it means from an operational point of view. Help us unpack, less than a year into the job that you've had to take over as COO, how the policy now speaks to some of the operational shifts and structures that you've had to implement from an organizational point of view.
Just historically, if you look at the Transnet performance, especially measuring it through tons of product or tons of minerals exported, you would have seen that it has been declining since 2017 all the way down to 2020, 21, 22. And the new leadership was brought in even before my time. And the task was to obviously stop that continuous decline. And it couldn't just be stopped by words. Now, people had to get together, team had to get together, formulate a plan that covered all of the aspects of Transnet and set targets to say we need to do things that will turn this performance around. And when we say turn the performance around, that will enable us to move a lot more tons than we are moving. Obviously, in that supply chain are many aspects that slow down the process, that bottleneck the process, and all of these issues were then put on a plan, and each element given then a target. And that whole process of identifying where the bottlenecks are, of putting action plans together, of getting people activated, was then termed the recovery plan.
Yes.
And in this recovery plan, we saw that in year one of the recovery plan, it did stop the bleeding, meaning the decline for the first time over 6 years or so. We saw a turn in the performance of Transnet, and by performance of Transnet in the number of tons handled by Transnet in a year.
Yeah.
You saw that turning around. And then obviously I joined now in the second year of the recovery plan, where we needed to take it even further. And the activities obviously involve us getting our rail, which has been neglected for a number of years, where the maintenance on the what we call the network, which means the track, the signaling, the formation of the rail, the sleepers, and all the other elements that get a rail track to be reliable. All of that was neglected over a number of years. And one of the things he needed to do is to bring that back to its design capacity. The other one, we had lots of local locomotives that we bought. Some we paid for and never used, some we paid for and are standing. And we needed to bring all of that back into operation so that it can handle the cargo that it was designed to handle. And that whole process, unfortunately, not an overnight thing, involves a lot of activities that was in the chain. And these locos that were already running, you needed to make them more available and more reliable. No use having locos that get on the line and then they stop.
Exactly.
So those are some of the activities. The other one is that we were under attack from our own citizens, destroying this whole network, stealing copper cables, disabling some of our power supplies, and some of those things we needed to handle. In that process, what I should not leave out is that obviously the government did appoint certain people called, and named this National Logistics Crisis Committee that worked with Transnet and the business together to contribute towards turning this or implementing the recovery plan. And inside Transnet are many trained, capable people that have gone out of their way to ensure that they contribute towards this recovery plan. So I just mentioned the FUD on rail. It goes all the way to the port itself, which also needed to handle a lot more cargo. There's equipment that have been sitting there in the ports that should have been replaced long ago or should have been upgraded quite a while ago. So we are fighting against time where we need to upgrade the equipment in the port. We need to buy new equipment in the port, and we need to improve our performance that can be felt by our shipping lines in obviously collecting goods from our ports. So that's part of the, in fact, it's much bigger. I've just touched on two elements of it, but the recovery plan is a much bigger plan in Transnet of turning this business around. And year to date, we can see ourselves now handling, even after turning it around the previous year, we are now 7 to 8% better than we were the previous year.
Got you. Increasing tonnage, maintaining infrastructure effectively, and of course, the support that you provide for key stakeholders. As you said, you've given us a quick overview of the implementation of the recovery plan, but of course, it goes really in depth when it comes to the various pillars that you have in the organization. And I'm really intrigued if we can focus on freight rail specifically, because there's also been the establishment of a new division called TRIM, specifically looking at infrastructure management. Help us unpack and I guess peel back at the layers as to what kind of initiatives have actually been implemented there and how this fundamentally translates into better operational capacity for the benefit of your customer.
You must just remember that the setting up of TRIM, it's a policy coming from government. Government saying to assist with moving minerals out of this country, we need to create the capacity that's required. And Transnet on its own can't do it. So for us to bring in new players, we needed to take the infrastructure out of the operations, separate them, and the infrastructure then enables other train operating companies to then come on and create a lot more capacity.
Primarily the private sector, getting them on board in a partnership to be expanded.
So through that, you by creating that gap with the new rail policy, it now allows, as you know, over December, a new network statement was put out that indicated clearly how the private players were going to be brought in. But you mentioned the issue of infrastructure. For these private players to come in and play, we need to create the infrastructure, meaning the rail tracks that these trains are going to run on. It is like, if I give an example of road, trying to get more road users in, but your roads aren't not existent. They're full of potholes, or some of them are closed because they can't operate, no traffic lights. Similarly on rail, for private players to come in, it has to be the rail track itself has to allow trains to run on it. If we are managing it manually, like we are now, certain areas we don't have the electronic or electrical signals that we used to have because cables have been stolen. So we have to do it by radio. That means we slow down the trains. We can't run at the same speed as we normally do. The track is not well maintained. If we run at the normal speed, trains will derail. So we slow them down. And so I can go on. So there are issues with the infrastructure that will then actually prohibit benefits being derived from adding more players, because then you add more trains, but they can't run. So at the moment, to get the infrastructure back into operation is so critical, so that when the private sector players come on together with TFR, they can handle more volume. What you don't want is to have more players handling the same or even less volume.
100%.
So that's why the infrastructure is so important.
100%. I'm glad you mentioned that, because just looking around the room as well, if we take a look at the various participants who are listening to this conversation, they're all from various entities, right? But again, it does speak to the efforts that are being made by Transnet to make sure that you are able to help and assist your customers, mainly within the mining and resource industry in South Africa. I'm keen for us, if you can take us into some detail, the level of outcomes that we've seen from policy right through to implementation. The turnaround times have been significant in this regard, and maybe it's important for us also to be able to reflect on that, to also understand the challenges that you're working against to move from policy to implementation on the ground, and thus outcomes that clients can experience, the hurdles, but also the successes that we've attained so far.
We were set very strict targets by government and by Treasury in supporting Transnet with a guarantee that we could utilize to now get loans to be able to pay for everything that we did. One of the things that was in that guarantee statement was us separating the operator and the infrastructure, and do it within a very short space of time. So that we have managed to do and met our obligations. Now we've got a new operating division with the CEO and the team, and obviously it's busy setting itself up. It's racing against time to actually resource itself and obtain funding and be able to get this network back into operation. So I believe that we've done that and we've met that obligation. But at the same time, there was work that we did last year when we call it during we stopped the whole operation. We fix up the network, portions of it, not the whole of it. And then when we resumed running, we started operating at a much higher rate. I mean, you would have seen the report coming from the RBCT, which came out a week or so ago, indicating that when they compared their last quarter, which is the quarter after we had done just the first fixing of our network, that there was a mega improvement, very visible, and they showed their numbers, 10% or so increase in the tonnages that we handle there. So you can go around the whole of our operations and you'd see this improvement coming through in rail, in ports, and in our maintenance company, Transnet Engineering. So there is a move now. It's like, I think it's a wave that it will not be stopped. It will continue. You start seeing every year, you'll see us reporting much better and better performance.
That's music to our ears, because as we know, this is critical for the ongoing growth and development of the economy and the support that it provides for various sectors. But many people might be standing around and saying, well, last year was a different story. We're seeing the results and outcomes now. This wave and the momentum is what we want to see maintained. What will it take in order to ensure that you're able to, number one, see the increase in tonnages, specifically when it comes to freight rail, and of course improved operational efficiency specifically for TPT? So what are the key themes that do need to stay in place to make sure that the progress we're looking for, the momentum that we want, is maintained next year this time?
One of the key issues that enable us is funding. So we need to obviously get funds in order to finance whatever activity we do.
Have we been able to put a number to it yet?
Yes, it's been published so many times.
Just checking if it's changed.
So no, it hasn't changed. So we then are looking at various aspects. But one of the areas or sources of funding that has now come to us, it's through our own clients. The RBCT, our all users forum and shipping lines all have come forward and said, we are willing to partner with you and help finance the restoration of this whole infrastructure. So we are in the process of working with our customers to actually fund and provide resources, technical resources, project management resources, and whatever is required. We obviously still in the early stages, but I can tell you that even last year, some of the performance improvement we've got, we would not have gotten if the customers did not participate in procurement, in sourcing material, in providing skills, and business also that's working with us through the NLCC, providing other skills and forming a partnership that is actively looking at physical things to do. So the things that we've done together with the customers are a big ingredient. Obviously, funding unlocks a lot more activity, and the more funding we get on the things that we want to do, the quicker we will be able to deliver the turnaround. And the more participation we get from our customers and other stakeholders, it increases the amount of resources that we can deploy in recovering. So I'm saying, in short, is that by working with our clients and other stakeholders who are willing to fund and add resources, and also working with government that's looking at bringing other players into the market, we will be able to speed up or shorten the amount of time required to restore our whole business in order to deliver. And we've been given a target by government right through from the president to say, we know you handled 152 million tons. You're saying you're going to handle 170 or 160. We want you to get this network to deliver 250 million tons. That's the network, not just Transnet alone, together with all of the participants. So we have this big project of getting our network now in the shortest possible time to have the capacity of 250 million tons. So whatever difference we have between what we are handling as Transnet will then be handled by the private sector. So that's where this drive is sitting, and the pressure on me personally and the team that reports to me. It's getting this capacity created so that all of the players within the market can then deliver 250 million tons within the next, by 3 years' time, probably maximum 5 years' time. In fact, we are so far behind. If we could have it now, we probably will be exporting 250 million tons because it's available in our mines. Yeah.
Got you. Before we wrap up, and of course, many will be keen to understand, as you've mentioned, there's partnership and direction from government, which has led to policy shifts and changes. That is translated into the operational efficiencies that you're implementing, and of course, a partnership with the key stakeholders and customers who have come on board, not only in terms of funding, but even in terms of collaborative exchanges that lead to innovative solutions. What do you need from South Africans at large as key stakeholders, especially perhaps when it comes to protecting the necessary infrastructure that we need?
Took words out of my mouth. I think that is the very key one. It's that the public out there and the criminals out there are actually committing what I personally call treason by destroying an infrastructure that is critical to this economy. So the public can assist in, the eyes are out there, identifying, sending information to the right authorities, so that we can prevent it happening, not just catch them after. The best thing for the South African public to do is to prevent damage to this property. Imagine we struggle to get funds to put into this infrastructure, then somebody steals it and we have to replace it. So meaning double. Now we spend double. And also we stop the operation when after every theft, all trains stop. So meaning me exporting less. So the public really can help from that area. The other parts, obviously the public, that's where we source skills from. We source skills from all our communities, people that are technically able to be employed by Transnet and to provide services to Transnet. They need to do it well, especially service providers. Then in the public, you ask the question, most of the public do supply services to Transnet. And those that supply us poor quality services, overpriced services, late services, they also contribute to the non-recovery or us moving backwards. So I would say to the public, protect the network. If you're a supplier into this network, give us your A game. Don't give us your worst service ever at the highest price ever. We actually need it at the lowest price, best service ever, so that we can compete with other supply chains around the world. And the public should know that South Africa competes with other countries in exporting its mineral. If we are very expensive, very slow, very inefficient, exporters or owners or people that are demanding the products we have will buy it elsewhere. So that's who we are competing with.
Exactly. Part of the global economy. Mr. Letsoalo, there's a tough job ahead of you, but you've already managed to do and be efficient with many of your team members. But we wish you all the best and looking forward to so many more updates that we'll see as a positive result coming through.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All the best.
Thank you. And thank you to our audience as well. We don't want you to go away because we will be continuing with this conversation. That was Solly Letsoalo, who's the Chief Operations Officer here at Transnet Group. But we will be expanding even further on this conversation by unpacking more around policy, how this actually speaks to the strategy and operational shifts that we see within the organization. We will dive into the details as well regarding TRIM, TFR, TPT, and many other aspects of the business that remain critical to the effective and efficient running of logistics in South Africa. You're listening to the Transnet podcast series here on the sidelines of the Mining Indaba 2025.